We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated, secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
What if I told you that everything you see in the world and what you see around you in your external experience is actually a reflection of what's inside? Today, we're going to uncover with a special guest how to master what is going on inside of us in order to make big life changes on the exterior. Mel Cunningham is an energetic leadership and empowerment coach with over 15 years of corporate experience. She has her own personal journey of overcoming her career, relationship, and health crises. She's a double board certified holistic health and wellness, energetics practitioner, yoga and meditation teacher, breathwork facilitator, and Reiki master. She has a passion for helping high achieving professionals take control of their lives for both professional success and our personal fulfillment. Mel, I am so excited to have you on the show because when we connected and I heard about what you were doing, I was like, this is so in a line. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, I am so passionate about helping women just really live their best life and taking control. And I'm excited to dive into our conversation today.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a big part of what this show is about is really taking control back for our lives. So this is going to be amazing. And you often talk about our external world being a reflection of our internal world and what's going on inside of us. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, we live in a society, right, where we just think this is how it is, right? Or,
Mhm.
society pressures. When we think about career, especially as women, we're often thinking about we're put in a box and we're like, this is what we must do to achieve, to reach this level, to prove our success, right? And maybe if it's not in a career, think about moms, right? Like moms are like, oh, I have to do it this way. I have to make it look easy. I have to make this all look, like it's simple and I have it all together. And then the background, we as women are sitting here, we're barely holding ourselves together because we're worried about that outward image, right? And so that's the big piece of when we start to understand that it's really what's internal and what we can do, then we can create that chain on the external. And really, it goes back to like that old paradigm because we've been trained. I mean, we're trained at a very young age that society tells us like what's expected of us. Those around us tell us this is the way it is. This is what you do. And, whether it's media, whether it's social media, whether it's something we watch on television, all of this is setting our expectations, telling us what this should be. And that's really, I look at that, that's old school, right? Because really what it is, that old paradigm is the outside is the cause of what is happening on the inside. And today, what
Yes.
we talk a lot about is it's what's on the inside that creates the outside. And for us to do that, we have to really consciously make that shift and that change to understand. And it goes back to what we're talking about, right? It goes back to that power, the power that we have within us. And so oftentimes we allow that external to influence our internal and influence our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings. And when we can come back to our true self and we understand that we actually have that control, that's when we can start creating that change. So I always say, out with the old, in with the new, right? And that's where we have that power, because we have that power in that moment to make that shift and that change.
Absolutely. And a lot of people struggle with really understanding what it is they actually want out of their life. And so I know that that clarity piece is really important. So, how can we start to gain clarity for what those desires are so that we can start reflecting in a more intentional way to get to where we want and make that shift that you're talking about?
Yeah. And oftentimes, Lindsay, this is when I work with my clients, this is probably the number one, I would say, challenge is, right?
Yeah.
Is because how
Yeah.
often, think about it, when is the last time somebody asked you, what is it you truly want, Lindsay? Like, what do you see for your
Yeah.
relationship? What do you see for career? What do you see for, if you had, the other day I was talking to somebody about a crystal ball. They're like, wouldn't it be great if we had a crystal ball? Well, if you had that crystal ball, what is it that you would want? What is it that you desire? And
Yeah.
oftentimes we can't, because of that external, because of the stressors, because of how we're on such autopilot, because we're really in today's world, we're literally just trying to survive the day, right? And that's what I
Um,
think is so powerful about the work I do, is because we can shift that and we can change that so that we actually can, have intention throughout our day and control our day instead of letting our day control us, right? And so, really, the big thing I always say is number one, take that moment to pause and say, let's dream a little bit. What is it that I desire? What would I like to see? So, for example, in your career, if it's not going the direction you want it to go, or it's, you're stressed, or you want to make a move, or you're feeling challenged in that area, what does it look like for you? What is it that you would want? And the thing is oftentimes we don't even give ourselves that opportunity to think about that, because we feel like,
mhm.
well, this is the way it is, so I don't really have any choice in that. And I'm here to tell you
Mm,
that you do have choice in that. And so by taking that moment, having that pause, and also understanding, it goes back to what I mentioned with the old paradigm, right? Is, the outside is the cause. No, the inside. That's the new paradigm.
yeah.
The inside is the cause. So what is it that we desire? And think. And, I always say too is, think outside of the box, be curious about it. Like, this is the opportunity and this is the time where we can approach it from curiosity instead of feeling like, we're stuck. And, I always say too is dream big. Even if you think it's
Yeah.
not possible, put it out there, because
Yes.
what puts things into motion. Because whatever we're focusing on is what we're attracting, we're getting more of. So that's why really taking that time and being intentional and saying, let's put that pause on and let's say, hey, what is it that I really do want? And break it down. When I work with my clients too, we break it down into the different areas in your life to say, what does that look like? And then
Yeah.
that then gives you that clarity to start looking and saying, what's working, what's not working, what do I have control of, what don't I have control of, what can I influence? Then that's where we can start being more intentional with our actions, which then creates the change.
So I love this visualization of the crystal ball because even as you're talking, I'm thinking about this and going, yeah, my dreams would get a lot bigger if I had a magic crystal ball, right? Like it helps your brain expand because I'm also very like realistic, logical, and I'll make really big, daring 10-year goals and dreams. And then I'll make very tactical plans. But when I look at a crystal ball, I mean, I'm going like way out, right? Like
Well,
it gets way bigger.
yeah, and that's the whole idea, right? Because we get stuck in, and I know we're going to dive a little bit into this, but as I meant, I work a lot with energy. And the thing is
Yeah.
energy is emotion, it's energy in motion, right? That's what it is. And so we sit here and we're like, what is it that we want to create? And to your point about the crystal ball is I see so much that we often think small because
Mm,
we're in a very material world, right? We're in a
yes.
very physical world.
Yeah.
And there is so much out there. I mean, we literally only see like 0.01% of what's possible for us. Literally, that's what we can logically see. And so when we do that, and when we open ourselves up to what is possible, infinite possibilities, what is possible, and we start to put that into motion, then that's how we can start then create that change. And that's the piece is we often, and that's the thing, it just came up with a client is, but that's not really possible for me. And I'm like,
Mm,
but why
why
isn't it?
not?
Right. But why not? And then that goes into a whole other story of, where we're pre-programmed, right? And that's the thing, and that's the challenge I like to, say to people is take that all away. It doesn't matter what you think or what has been. Just dream big and think about what would
Yeah.
be possible because that is where then, like you were talking about, I like to make the big goals and then you have the tactical goals and you break that down. That's exactly what we need to do. But you know what? If we set our goal for here, guess what? Maybe we hit here. But if we set our goal
Right.
here, maybe we get here. And that's the thing is I often find that we sell ourselves short. Like we're
Yeah.
constricting ourselves too much because we're like, oh, well, maybe not for me or, you know, it's just we're limiting. And so that goes
Yeah.
back to, being open to say what is possible, open to those infinite possibilities. And when we start to
Yeah.
open ourselves up about that, then that's when things start to shift in our life.
Absolutely. And there's another piece I want to pull out from what you're saying, and that's that this is such good news that so some people might think, "Oh, it's actually in me, it's not out here, like now it's on me." But that's really good news because we are in control. And you said something earlier about claiming our power, getting our power back. And that's exactly what that sounds like and feels like as we talk about it, because all of a sudden we're not being like, oh, well, I guess I can't because this thing over here or this person over here, I'm at a whim, right? Like I'm just stuck because of my environment. No, it's we can turn it inwards and we actually have a choice sometimes, even when we don't think we do.
Exactly, 100%, Lindsay. And that's the whole thing is we are co-creating. And really, every moment is a moment for change. And that moment, in every moment, is where that power comes. And so that's where we have to decide in that moment, what is it? And that is a lot of what I do is helping people understand that just because something's been a way doesn't mean it has to be that way. And just because society or just because, maybe colleagues, family, friends say that, oh, this is what it is, it doesn't have to be that way. But you, the individual, you have to take back that power. And really, it's about empowerment, right? And
Yes.
we're going to talk like that's the whole thing of are we coming from a place of limitless or empowerment? And that is the shift. Now, we can't control the outcome, but we can control how we show up and we can control the intention that we have.
Yeah.
And by doing that, that then changes how that influences and how that energy is going to flow and help create that for you.
And you talk a lot about how everything starts with our energy. How can changing our energy lead to actually making some of those big life changes?
Yeah. So literally with energy, I mean, we are, it goes back to quantum physics and we are 99.9999% energy and only 0.00001% matter. And it's hard for us to
Yeah.
understand that, right? Because we look we look at our physical world, right? Our physical bodies,
Mhm.
we touch things, we have that, and we're like, what are we talking about? But at a subatomic level, everything has an energy and a vibration and a flow to it. As we're sitting here, you're sitting on the couch, I'm sitting on my chair, like that is energy as well. Those are actual
Yeah.
physical things that are created from energy. And so with the energy, that is where we have that power, because everything has that frequency and that vibration. So really what it is by being able to master and understand our energy, meaning about what we're putting out, because right, it goes back to that whole frequency and vibration. And so whether we're coming from a place of like constriction or openness, that's all energy.
Mm.
And then that's how we
Yeah.
create that change. And so when we start to understand, oftentimes we think of energy like, oh, I feel tired today, or oh, I feel like I'm energized. That's that physical energy. But the energy within us is, it goes back to like that emotions, the thoughts, the feelings. It goes back to like, how are we controlling those things so that we can then show up as our true self?
And another part of that lasting change that you've talked about is our ego and the inner work that we're doing on ourselves. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that might look like?
Yeah, because, once again, it's that energy, and we have two sides, right? We have our ego self and we have our true self. And, oftentimes, we think of, like, if we think about ego in the practical mindset, we all know somebody, right, who maybe is egotistical, or who are like, okay, whoa, that's a little too much. But really what we're talking about with our ego is that part of our subconscious, our mind, that wants to keep
Yeah.
us safe, that wants to keep us in the familiar. And so by us then, going back to, we have the power to choose, we choose, are we going to allow the ego in which it's that familiar, it's the way it's been, this is how it is, it's that automatic, those thoughts that are continually going through our mind. And most often it's negative. And that's a natural,
Mm.
normal thing. I mean, our mind does tend to go towards the negative, and that's
Mhm.
the ego's job. And so I say, think of the ego as, that lion roaring. And that ego is constantly coming at you, constantly saying, like, every time, like, you've chosen to dream big and you're like, okay, I'm going to go for this big goal. And the ego's going, no, Lindsay, no, no, why would you want to do that? You've always stayed here, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the ego's job to do that. But then we have the flip side of it. We have our true self. And our true self is really, it's think of it as like that right mind, that mind of like, what do we truly desire? So it goes back to, right, once we get that clarity and we understand, this is what I really want, this is what I want in my life, that's that true self. And then you start having that dialogue between the ego and the true self. And they, both of them, will show up. They show up all the time. The thing is we often aren't aware of it because we're not consciously, like, we haven't chosen, we haven't decided, because it goes back to, right, we get to control, we get to understand. So when we start understanding, we start creating this internal dialogue with ourselves, then we start noticing when the ego mind is showing up and when our true self is showing up. And it's going to show up physically, psychologically, and spiritually. It's going to, think of like broad-based ego, constriction, blaming, frustration, stress. You're feeling, like low energy. You're feeling like it's all, like, it's very self-centered, the ego is. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
true self, where your true self is, it's open, it's coming from high vibration, it's coming from curiosity, it's coming from love, it's coming from, connectiveness, forgiveness. And so you can see, even in that, you can see the difference in the energy, right? Ego feels very
Yeah.
energy. True self seems, lighter, more freeing. And that's really what I'm talking about when we're looking at the ego and the true self in our internal is, step one is we have to start to recognize when this is showing up and what part of it. None of this is right or wrong or good or bad. I mean, it's in all of
Yeah.
us. It's just us saying, what are we going to give more control and power to? What are you choosing to step into? And it's like anything. once you start to become aware of this, and then you start to say, hey, I don't want to feel that constriction. I don't want to feel that stress. I want to feel like I'm in control of this situation. I want to feel
Yeah.
like I want to come from a place of goodness in this situation. That is then that moment where we have that power to choose. But we have to start to understand. So, starts with becoming aware of what's happening. And then, it's that inner dialogue. And as we start to do it, it's like anything, right? It's that muscle and it's going to happen. And, I think about my day to day. When I first started with this work, sometimes I'd sit there and feel like, I'm like, oh my gosh, my entire day is an ego. I'm like, I'm allowing my ego to drive every one of my
Yeah.
decisions, my interactions,
Yeah.
all of that. Well, but see, until we become aware of it, we can't change it, right? So
Right.
then you start, and this work is about like little moments throughout the day, being able to acknowledge it and saying, making those shifts. And they're just little minute shifts that you change, which then changes the trajectory of the day as well as then your goals, right? So that's the
Yeah.
big thing between that ego and that true self, because it's out, both of them are always going to be there. It's just
Yeah.
what are we giving more control to? And the only person who's going to change that is you.
Yeah. I love this analogy of the lion inside because for me, it's always been my inner wolf. And then
Mm.
you talk about, finding that true self. So for me, that's my inner puppy, right? A lot of people have inner childs. I like to talk about my inner puppy because, for
I
me, it's
love
just more
that.
relatable. I love dogs. And so I've always had this analogy, very similar to what you're saying, but like when I'm connected to myself and I have that true self, it's the inner puppy, right? It's sweet, it's fun, it's light, it's playful. And then when my ego gets involved, the inner wolf comes out and right? It's not so great. It doesn't get me the results I want. It is more restricted. And when our inner wolf or our inner, lion comes out, it can make us feel like we don't have a choice. And it can make us feel like we're just dealt the cards we're dealt and this is what we have to deal with and we have to fight or resist or right, there's all this like straining, unnecessary straining. So like let's say we're your client and we need help dealing with that and understanding that we have a choice and we are the creator of our lives. How would you help us do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that, Lindsay, about the wolf and then the baby wolf and like being able to recognize that, because that's the whole
Yeah.
thing, right? Is oftentimes, first thing I do with my clients is, we go back to that clarity, right? Because we want to understand, like,
Yeah.
where are we at and what is it that we want and what's working, what's not
Yeah.
working. And then starting to recognize. So the first thing I always say too is let's begin to recognize what's happening. Because as
Yeah.
we sit here today, it's just a culmination of all of our experiences. It's all of our influences, everything. And it goes back to what I mentioned before about the subconscious. All of this is happening in our subconscious mind. And our subconscious
Yeah.
mind is like, think about that as that, the computer. It literally, our subconscious mind just literally tick, 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 takes in all the information, every single thing that's happened to us, up until to this day and continues every single day. And then from
Yeah.
that, that's where our ego gets that information, right? And then that's where our ego is like, oh no, we're going to keep you safe over here. So
Yeah.
step one is that awareness, right? And to be able to
Mhm.
say, okay, what is actually happening? What are the thoughts that I'm having? Because
Yeah.
like you were talking about there too, is being able to recognize that. And then that in that moment, you're noticing like, oh, okay, I'm feeling small. I'm feeling constricted. I'm feeling like this doesn't feel good. I'm feeling this resistance. And that resistance
Yeah.
right there that you mentioned, Lindsay, that's ego.
Mhm.
Anytime you are feeling resistance, that's
Yeah.
ego, because your ego is trying to keep you in the familiar. And so when we notice that, we have to start to notice those things, right? And so that's step one with my clients is I'm like, okay, we're going to just look at it. We're going to observe.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is we're going to step into that observer role, because in that observer role, then we gather that information, right? Because until we know, we can't change anything. We can't do anything.
Yeah,
And so by
absolutely.
doing that, and the other thing that I think is really important too is we're observing this from a non-judgment role. When you were talking
Yeah.
about the inner child and those inner critics, like that's the other thing is, once again, that's all of our subconscious. All of those
Mhm.
things that are coming up for us, that's just our subconscious, telling us, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, that's never going to happen for me. Oh, well, it's nothing ever works out for me. Whatever that is, right? That is because
Mhm.
that's our subconscious telling us that. So once we
Yeah.
become and we shift into that observer role without judgment, because oftentimes too, that's something I find is sometimes when we start to become aware of this, we're like, oh geez, like what's wrong with me, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
then we
Yeah.
go into this blaming mode. We're like, oh, I must be really like, I must be really bad, or I must be messed up because I'm
Yeah.
spending a lot of time over here in ego. And
Yep.
the one thing I want to remind everybody is it's not, that's just a piece of who you are. It's not who you are. And that's where,
Yeah.
once again, it goes back to that power, because we have the power to
Yeah.
start to unravel that. But the only way we can unravel that is back to we have to become aware. So the first step when I'm working with my clients is let's get clear and then let's observe. Let's observe what's happening. Because once we understand what's happening, once we understand what's driving those things, from a place of non-judgment, from a place of like, this is really, like I always say, this is time to be curious. This is time for you to be curious about what's happening, because through curiosity, then we can create that change. And so by doing that, then based on that, then we look and say, okay, where do we first need to focus so we can create that first and those little wins? Because like that's the other thing too, is when we start doing this internal work, you know, sometimes it can feel like, whoa, like, you know, there's a lot, or um, I had no idea about this. This is what was happening, and how am I going to change this? And the thing is you can make such small changes that make really big impacts. So by getting clear and by being able to observe and understand what's currently happening, then that's where then we then take that and say, okay, let's make these small little changes. And this isn't about being perfect either. Like that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Remember, like life is ebbs and flows, right? And
Yes.
we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking to say, okay, it's like it's not all of a sudden we're going to quiet the ego mind, and the ego mind's never, and we're going to be, living our life in true self-alignment all the time. That's not what this is about. It's just it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to that understanding, that awareness. And when we understand that, then with our power, we're able to sit there and say, okay, I'm choosing where I'm going to put my energy. I'm choosing, am I going to give my energy to my ego or to my true self? Do I want to, am I going to be low vibrational? Am I going to be high vibrational? What am I putting out there? And then as you do that, just like think about when you go to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, if you haven't ran, you don't, set out and first day you run 10 miles. You run
Right.
a half a mile, right? And that's the whole thing. And that's the beauty of this is when you start to do that and you start making those little changes, then you start looking back and you're like, whoa, okay, this is different. And then it's like everything just starts to layer on itself. And then you
Yeah.
start to see that ebb and flow. And it's just beautiful. And once again, this all comes back to all of this is within you. And you have that power and that control to be able to choose which way you're going.
That is so helpful. And you talk about these small shifts and these small changes that we can make. So, how do these, like, intentional daily habits start playing a role into how we can make that change happen? Because I know some of this can feel like a lot. So, when we can, I love that idea that you're talking about of these small shifts. So, how do we, how does that show up as those daily habits that are
Yeah.
really intentional?
Yeah, I love this because, that's the other piece, right? Is sometimes when we start looking at this and we're like, okay, I want to choose something different. Most of us, we jump in and we're like, we go off the deep end and we're like, okay, I want to
Yeah.
change every single thing, right? We're like,
Yeah.
okay. And I'm like, okay, let's start small. So when I'm working with my clients is we'll look at the area. So it always breaks down into like that emotional, mental, and physical aspects of life. And we're
Yeah.
like, what is the area that we can create the biggest win the quickest? And one of the things I always say, and the thing that makes a difference is from the moment you wake up, you decide how your day is going to go. I'm like, before
Ooh.
you even get out of bed, before you even do anything, number one, express gratitude for the day, right? Because gratitude then also, once again, it goes back to that energy. So what are we putting out? How are we starting our day? So we're going to start our day from that high vibe, positive energy. So expressing gratitude for the day. And then number two, what is your intention for the day? What is it that you want out of this day? And this doesn't have to be the big dream. This could be, I want to enjoy my cup of coffee,
Yeah.
peacefully and actually savor and enjoy my coffee. Or it could be
Mhm.
like maybe you have a meeting and
Yeah.
you're like, I'm going to rock this meeting. I'm going to go in and I'm going to be the powerhouse that I am. Whatever that intention is, that is right there. That's creating the energy, that's creating the intention, that's setting your mindset to say, this is what we're putting in motion for today. So that is always one of the things I always start with, is because oftentimes, right, most people, what do? Alarm goes off, they jump out of bed, and then they're like off to the races, right?
Yeah.
We haven't even thought about what do we want out of this day yet. So those things right there, I mean, we're talking seconds. And that
Mhm.
shift right there will change the trajectory of your day. And think about it, right? We've all had this experience, right? Like maybe we wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, like maybe it's snowing, right? I'm in Colorado, so it's like, okay, it's snowing. And we're like, oh, it's snowing. It's good. I don't want to have to go out in the snow. It's going to be a miserable day. What happens to your day? It's a
Mhm.
miserable day.
You look for more misery.
Exactly. And so then that's why that one little change right there, putting
Yeah.
your intention, expressing gratitude, setting your intention for the day, that will set the tone for your day. And then the next thing is then we look at those areas, because once again, we didn't get where we are today overnight. We're not going to unravel all of
Right.
this overnight. So
Yeah.
once again, we're going to give ourselves some grace here. And then we're going to look at that priority. So with my clients, we'll look at the priority, like what is the most important thing? Because, what's the piece of that that is creating the most, friction or the struggle or the stress for them? And then we will, set habits around that. So say, for example, it's schedule, right? Like sometimes a lot of women I work with talk about how, like, I feel like, I have no say in how, what happens in my schedule because, things just get put on my schedule or there's so many demands on me and, the schedule controls me. Well, there's ways that we can control that schedule. And once again, that goes
Yes.
back to what we talked about before, right? Is we think that, oh, the external is driving this. So then we look at that and we really dive in. And so through that accountability and that support, working with my clients, we can start to see and shift that perspective. Because so often when we're in that stuckness or we're feeling overwhelmed or we're feeling like everything is out of control, it's hard for us to like step back for a moment and objectively say, where are opportunities for me to influence? Because once again, we talk about control and, and it's the control is how do we control so that we can be with ease and flow and achieve what it is that we want, whether it's career or life, right? But the big piece is no, we can't control everything. But how do we
Right.
control the things we can? And then how do we influence the things we can so that they work for us? Because so often, and the other piece of it too is so often we put ourselves on the back burner, right? We're like, oh, well,
Mhm.
I was going to do this, but I can't do this
Yeah.
because somebody else just put something into my calendar. And that's the piece of working and helping us understand when we're looking at those intentional habits, how do we set boundaries? How do we,
Yeah.
activities with intention? And how do we control and influence the things that we can so we can create the day, the life that we want?
That's amazing. And I know that you have a free gift for us on stress management and how we can work on that for ourselves. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was so funny as I was sharing that. I was like, okay, this is exactly what's in the guide. And so this little mini guide is really an opportunity to, as I've mentioned before, I mean, step one is, that clarity, right? Understanding what it is that you want. So this guide will actually literally walk you through the steps. It primarily focuses on the two top priorities. Number one is getting that clarity and that awareness. Understanding, it's, observing, where am I at? Where do I want to go? What's working? What's not working? Evaluating the different areas in your life, saying, okay, because like I said, we have to become aware of what's working and what's not working before we can create the change, right? And
Yeah.
then that in itself eliminates a lot of stress. Because right when we're in a state of that overwhelm and we're just like everything's out of control and you feel like you don't have that control, that's the easiest way to take back your control and understand. And once you have that awareness, then you can start to create that change. And it just helps to eliminate so much of that stress and that pressure. So once we have that clarity, then as I mentioned before, we're going to look and say, okay, where is this showing up in my life? Where is this showing up? And then the second thing is I'm always like, we want to get back to us. So one of my biggest priorities is self-care. And
Mm.
so often we think it's going to the spa, right? And it is. I mean,
Yeah.
self-care is going to the spa, but self-care is something we do every single day. So even that
Right.
intention in the morning, expressing that gratitude, setting that intention, that's self-care. Finding little
Yes.
ways to add moments in your day, as I mentioned, the cup of coffee. So often people like they drink coffee and they're drinking coffee as they're running out the door to get to their first
Yeah.
meeting or whatever, right? And I'm like, when's the
Yeah.
last time you sat down and actually just savored your coffee in silence by
Mhm.
yourself, no distractions, and just enjoy your cup of coffee? And so with that self-care, we're looking at what are we doing? Like, we're looking at how are we living our life? What about our diet? What about our sleep? What about our movement? How do we, because once again,
Mhm.
that goes back to helping our energy. When we take care of ourselves, then we can show up better. And then we talk a lot in this guide, then I also share ways to incorporate like those intentional habits. How do you mindfully do that with intention? What does that look like? So there's a lot of opportunity in the guide to be able to reflect on what you're doing and ideas on what you can incorporate. And then, it is that whole point of saying, you know, integrating that, saying like, okay, I don't have to make these changes all today, but then how do I start to build on and create the life that I desire? So this guide literally walks you through. It's a little roadmap to walk you through of creating that awareness, getting clear and saying, here are little things that we can do. Because the other thing that I find that sometimes keeps us stuck in what's not working, we know something needs to change, but we're just like, I don't even know what to do. This guide will help you get clarity on what to do. And it will also start to spur those ideas of how do you start to make those small intentional shifts in your life and understand that by doing this, taking this time, you will create more time, you will create more space, you will create more energy so that you can have more success in your career. You can have more personal fulfillment. So it's really, this guide will really walk you through and start to help you understand how you can start regaining that control and, just really stepping into your true self.
Amazing. Well, you have shared so much incredible wisdom today and so many great tools. if we're not sure where to start, Mel, what's the first thing we should go do right now?
The first thing is take a moment and express gratitude. I always say the first thing
Mm,
you can do, because gratitude creates abundance. Gratitude
yeah.
creates change. Gratitude, when we look at gratitude, gratitude also, when we're coming back to energy, that's that high vibrational energy. So, number one, be thankful for where you are today and what you have today. And throughout the day, just notice all the blessings, notice all of the, the um, blessings, opportunities, everything that's there in front of you. Notice that. Because once again, let's go back to energy. Like attracts like.
Mhm.
So when we're in that
Yeah.
place of gratitude, and then the second thing is pause. Like when you notice that you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or you're not, maybe you're feeling tension in your body, maybe you're realizing like, whoa, I just like something just triggered me, or you notice that
Mm.
you're frustrated, that kind of thing, pause and breathe. And the reason I say that is that movement, that thing, pausing and taking a deep breath, that will shift those neural pathways. And that gives you the space and the opportunity to choose. So those are the two things. If you did those two things, you would see change in your life.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today with us. Thank you for really uncovering and showing us how everything that we are struggling with or unsure about all goes back to what's inside of us, not what's happening in the external world, and how that really is a reflection. So, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing.
Thank you. It was such a joy. And yeah, I mean, one final note is just, I encourage you to just step into this and understand that sometimes it can feel like a lot, but with the right support, and once you start opening this up, just beautiful things happen. I mean, time and time again, that there's, and that's what I get excited about, is seeing the change and helping others, see that opportunity in themselves, that they can actually create that change and live that life of balance and flow and ease. And so this has been a pleasure. And we could talk about this all day long, but just a reminder, we all have the power within us.
Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world. And as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well-being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.